At the race, Yomaski finds his thoughts drifting to his love for romantic comedies about childhood friends. He imagines his own childhood friends confessing to him if they were in a rom-com. But as the race begins, reality quickly catches up to him. He knows those fantasies will never come true. Looking down at his palm, he sees that to win the race, he needs to find someone he loves. One morning, Yonaski wakes up feeling cold. Instinctively, he calls out Shio's name, already convinced she's the reason the window is wide open. He feels arms suddenly wrap around his torso as he realizes Shio is cuddling him. As he tries to pry her off, she only tightens her grip, forcing him to lie on top of her. If this were a romantic comedy, he knows this scene could lead to something dirty. But this is reality, so he pinches Shio's lips. Shio stirs, then immediately stiffens once she realizes Yonaski is right in front of her. She panics and starts yelling at him for sneaking into her room, only for Yonaski to point out that it's actually his room. Shio switches tactics and blames him for not fixing his lock. Eventually, she drops the argument and casually tells him she'll be at the front door. She climbs out through the window, insisting there's nothing wrong with using a shortcut. She doesn't notice the wind lifting her skirt. Yonaski hurriedly points out that she's flashing him. While getting ready for school, Yonaski tells himself it would be strange to start seeing Shio as a romantic interest. Still, he can't deny that what he saw earlier was sexy. When he finally steps outside, Shio immediately clings to his arm. He asks her to let go, but she only snuggles closer, insisting this is normal. As they walk to school, Yonaski feels disappointment. He's sure that to Shio, he's just a friend, while he keeps thinking dirty thoughts about her. He swears to himself that he will never let Shio know about the indecent thoughts. Meanwhile, Shio is irritated because, despite her efforts, she still isn't getting the reaction she wants from him. She subtly presses her chest closer to his arm, hoping to make him notice. Instead, Yonaski only complains about how hard it is to walk. Hearing that makes Shio grumble inwardly about how much effort she puts in every single day just to catch his attention. She convinces herself that someday Yonaski's heart will belong to her. An idea suddenly comes to mind. Pretending to trip, she deliberately pulls him down with her. Just as she planned, Yonaski lands on top of her. She accuses him of touching her chest on purpose. She recalls seeing a similar scene in one of the comics he keeps in his room, so she's confident that this kind of situation should appeal to him. However, Yonaski's reaction is dry. He calmly gets up and complains about how clumsy she is. In reality, he's struggling to keep his expression under control. Seizing another chance, Shio suddenly claims that she sprained her ankle, putting on a cute act in hopes that it'll finally make him flustered. Instead, she's caught off guard when Yonaski helps her to the side of the road and pulls out a first aid kit. Yonaski explains that he's always prepared because Shio has always been reckless. He even recalls how, when they were kids, she used to jump across rooftops and get hurt in the process. Shio blushes, realizing how closely he's been watching over her. Once Yonaski determines that her ankle is fine, he insists that they should continue heading to school. Shio quickly catches up to him and grabs his hand. The sudden contact makes both of them flustered. Shio struggles to come up with an excuse to keep holding his hand and blurts out that she just wants to make sure he actually goes to school, remembering how she used to drag him there when they were younger. To reinforce her excuse, she lifts one leg slightly and claims her ankle still hurts and that she could use some support. Seeing no point in arguing, Yonaski gives in and they continue walking hand in hand. Despite this, Yonaski feels a quiet wave of disappointment. He knows that this is probably as far as his relationship with Shio will ever go. As they near the main street, he starts wondering what people might think if they see them. Yonaski pretends not to care, and the two of them walk forward into the crowd. Still, he can't help feeling surprised that Shio is willing to be seen like this with him. His imagination runs wild because the situation feels far too close to a romantic comedy moment. They're startled when they hear something drop and turn to see Akari staring at them with a bewildered expression, nervously pointing at their hands. They immediately pull apart and try to explain. Akari's confusion quickly melts into a mischievous grin as she starts teasing them. As she bends down to retrieve her fallen bag, she struggles to keep her composure. Luckily, Yonaski is too focused on clearing up the misunderstanding to notice her shaking shoulders. Suddenly, Akari's demeanor changes. She turns cold toward him and accuses Yonaski of being a creep toward Shio. She claims that it's her duty as one of his childhood friends to teach him a lesson. She turns to leave, but Yonaski panics and tries to stop her, accidentally grabbing her chest. Akari immediately explodes, scolding him while strangling him. Shio hurriedly steps in and trying to calm her down by explaining that they were only holding hands because she wanted to drag Yonaski to school. Realizing the misunderstanding, Akari freezes before turning away in embarrassment. She calls both of them idiots. Both Shio and Yonaski feel awkward and embarrassed. They had both thought that maybe they were finally making some progress in their relationship. Yonaski starts imagining how both Akari and Shio would completely embarrass him if they ever found out he caught feelings for Shio. Once Akari puts enough distance between them, she drops her act. She pulls out an old photo of her and Yonosuke from their childhood. She realizes that if she doesn't do something, Shio might actually win him over. She regrets being so harsh toward him. Still, she mutters to herself that her actions are only because he's annoying. Her face turns red as she wonders if he thinks she's flatter than Shio. She swears to the sky that Yonosuke will pay for this. She tells herself she doesn't care about him at all. In contrast, Shio silently cheers herself on, convinced she can make Yonosuke love her. Meanwhile, Yonosuke vows that no one will know his thoughts. At school, Akari immediately calls him a creep when she notices he bought the same drink as her. Akari is Yonosuke's other childhood friend, but they are constantly fighting. Shio scolds them, but is called away for her class representative duties. The moment she leaves, they immediately start insulting each other. Yonosuke instantly regrets his words, remembering how, when they were younger, Akari used to be sweet and constantly stuck by his side. Now he can't help but wonder if she even considers him a friend. Hoping to make amends, he mentions his drink and casually tells Akari how good it tastes. Akari pretends not to care at all. In her mind, Akari curses him for not noticing her efforts. She had glammed up, studied hard so they could attend the same school, and even bought the same drink just to give them a chance to talk. She promises herself that she'll start being nicer if Yonosuke would just look her way. They end up opening their drinks at the same time, and Akari immediately accuses him of copying her. Yonosuke suddenly realizes he's holding Akari's drink. He tries to warn her that she grabbed the wrong one, but it's already too late. Akari's eyes widen as the realization sinks in. She gets flustered by the thought that she's just shared an indirect kiss with Yonosuke. Akari regains her composure and teasingly insults him, saying he's acting like a grade schooler for getting worked up. Noticing how red his face has become, she decides to tease him even more, even calling him a virgin. That comment finally makes Yonosuke snap back. He asks if she has any experience herself. Akari pretends to be confident, claiming that she does, and says the only reason she froze earlier was that the idea of sharing an indirect kiss with him was disgusting. Yonosuke fires back, insisting that he can kiss with his eyes closed. Their argument starts drawing attention, and Akari turns away, hiding her tears. The thought that Yonosuke kissed someone else hurts more than she expected. Trying to brush it off, Akari pretends not to believe him and challenges him to prove it by kissing her. They eventually find themselves by the staircase, both trembling with nerves while trying to fake confidence. Yonosuke notices that Akari is shaking, but she quickly mocks Yonosuke for his visibly trembling knees. After a moment, Yonosuke finally comes clean and admits that he has never kissed anyone before. Akari's entire demeanor changes, and she suddenly looks at him more gently. She cups his face and slowly leans in, leaving Yonosuke stunned. For a brief moment, it feels romantic. Just before their lips meet, Shio's voice interrupts them. They turn to face her blank stare. Shio suddenly steps closer, and Yonosuke begins to panic, worried that the situation is turning into a messy love triangle. Instead, Shio casually reaches up and pulls a loose thread from his hair, asking if they were getting close because Akari wanted to remove it. Akari nervously agrees, then accidentally trips, revealing her bear print underwear. Shio immediately covers Yonosuke's eyes. Yonosuke makes fun of Akari for being a kid, which earns him a sharp punch to the stomach. They immediately start arguing again, only reinforcing Yonosuke's belief that he can never be in a relationship with a childhood friend. Meanwhile, Shio mistakenly thinks that the two of them almost kissed and realizes that Akari may be her greatest threat. Back in the classroom, Yonosuke's male classmates gush over Shio and Akari, openly admiring how beautiful they are. They complain that it's a waste that both girls are close to Yonosuke and even ask if he's ever seen them change clothes. Yonosuke hurriedly insists that he doesn't see his childhood friends as women. He doesn't realize that Shio has just walked in. Shio pretends not to be offended and suddenly hugs him. When Yonosuke asks her to let go, she only presses closer, insisting that it's fine since they are close. She then asks if she can copy his homework. Yonosuke hands her his notes and tells her to stop clinging to him, but Shio ignores him. Instead, she casually sits down on his lap and starts copying his homework. When Yonosuke protests, saying it's inappropriate, Shio only rubs herself against him. This causes him to let out an involuntary sound, making him panic. Unfortunately for him, everyone notices and his classmates immediately start calling him a pig. Shiva defends him, saying that she and Yonosuke have always acted like this. He tells her to hurry up and finish copying his homework. Shio does as he says, but she's clearly pleased now that she's confirmed his weakness. She teasingly grinds against him, knowing it's an effective way to make him finally see her as a woman. Akari scolds them for causing such a scene and insists that Shio copy the homework somewhere less scandalous. She tries to pull Shio off Yonosuke's lap, but Shio stubbornly refuses. Taking it as a challenge, Akari tells Shio to scoot over and sits down on Yonosuke's other leg. The entire class stares at the bizarre scene as Akari explains that she forgot her homework and that by sitting here, strange rumors won't spread about Shio. Akari begins to fidget nervously, which Shio interprets as a challenge. In response, Shio grinds herself even harder against Yonosuke. Unable to take it anymore, Yonosuke scolds both of them and pushes them off his lap, accidentally touching their chests in the process. He quickly excuses himself to go to the bathroom. Shio becomes more determined than ever to win his heart, while Akari remains overwhelmed. Alone in the bathroom, Yonosuke can only complain about the girl's actions. Yonosuke rushes through the crowd to get onto the bus, his mind filled with thoughts about how forbidden it feels to fall in love with his childhood friends. He manages to get on, but since it's crowded, he has to stand and hold on. He accidentally bumps into another passenger and quickly turns to apologize. For a moment, he notices how pretty she is, though something about her feels strangely familiar. When she turns around, Yonosuke realizes it's Shio, who smiles happily when she sees him. Yonosuke tells her he's on his way to the bakery because there's a big sale on their goods, which happens to be where she's headed as well. Shio starts talking, completely unaware that Yonosuke's gaze is on her as he begins to notice how much more mature she's become. Suddenly, the bus swerves to the left, throwing Shio off balance. Without thinking, Yonosuke catches her. To hide his embarrassment, he starts complaining, but Shio only presses herself closer, even wrapping her arms around him. Yonosuke takes a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Noticing his reaction, Shio takes the chance to tease him. Lowering her voice, she asks if he's feeling motion sick. Yonosuke blushes at how close they are, and his embarrassment deepens when Shio gently rubs his earlobes. She explains that she used to do this when he would get motion sickness as a kid. He can't deny how much this intimate moment is affecting him, so he suddenly pulls her into a hug to hide his face as Shio stiffens in surprise. Yonosuke quickly makes up an excuse, saying that he feels a little sluggish and would appreciate it if Shio could help him get to the bakery. He tells himself that this position is better, since he doesn't have to look into her eyes. Still, his racing heart betrays him. When he decides to look at her again, he's caught off guard by her flustered expression. Shio tries to say something, but before she can, Yonosuke quickly leads her off the bus. Once they step outside, Shio looks at him in confusion, since the bakery is still farther down the road. Yonosuke tells Shio to stop hiding her feelings. Shio feels a spark of hope, wondering if Yonosuke somehow knows that she loves him. She pretends to be confused and asks him to explain. Instead of answering directly, Yonosuke walks over to a vending machine and buys her a soda. When he hands her the can, Shio looks puzzled. Yonosuke explains that it's for her motion sickness, since he knows she's just as prone to it as he is. He also knows that Shio usually perks up after having a soda. Though she gives him a slightly gloomy look, she accepts it anyway. The two of them sit down on a nearby bench and start drinking. Shio feels grateful for the small gesture, even though she can't help thinking that maybe it isn't the right time for them to have a romantic comedy moment. Still, she slowly leans against him, telling herself that she just needs to keep trying. When Yonosuke notices her weight against him, Shio casually explains that she likes the feeling of him. Yonosuke pretends not to care, but the hand holding his soda trembles from his nerves. Back at school, the three childhood friends are playing a word game. Akari suddenly stops on her turn, complaining that it's stupid to be playing something like that at their age. Shio whines that she's bored and just wanted to do something together, but the rain is keeping them from going outside. Akari says that the rain will probably stop by the time school ends, but she decides to continue the game for Shio's sake. When it's Yonosuke's turn, he says Shio's name, which instantly grabs both girls' attention. Realizing how it sounded, Yonosuke quickly explains that he didn't mean her name, but a Japanese word that just happens to sound similar. Akari feels a stab of jealousy that Shio's name came so naturally to him, but she quickly turns that feeling into irritation. They keep playing the word game, but now Akari deliberately ends all her words with A, trying to bait Yonosuke into saying her name. Even after several rounds, despite her careful setup, Yonosuke never says it, which makes her irritated. Yonosuke grows annoyed since he keeps having to start his words with A, but he ends up crushing Akari's hopes by saying Aloe. Shio smoothly follows with Yonosuke's nickname, Ayu, which shocks both Yonosuke and Akari. However, she quickly teases him that she meant to say hey you in their accent. Akari fumes inwardly as she realizes they're practically calling each other, so she decides to double her efforts. The game begins again with Akari and she tries to bake him again, but her name still isn't said. When she's forced to come up with a word starting with E, she shyly blurts out Yonosuke's nickname. Both Yonosuke and Shio stare at her in surprise as she tries to pass it off as the same joke Shio used earlier. Shio quickly points out that repeats aren't allowed, meaning Akari has just lost the game. They prepare for Akari to receive her punishment. Watching this, Shio can't help thinking it might have been better if she had lost instead. After school, it starts raining again as Yonosuke heads home. While passing a shrine, he spots Akari taking off her soaked stocking while complaining about the weather. Yonosuke lets out a startled sound, alerting Akari to his presence and making her slip. Flustered, Akari starts throwing random items at him, forcing him to retreat. As Yonosuke leaves the shrine, guilt washes over him for leaving her behind. Akari, feeling miserable about the situation, is surprised when Yonosuke suddenly comes back, holding out his umbrella and offering to walk with her. Not wanting to look weak, she refuses at first, but quickly takes it back when he starts to walk away. She makes it seem like he begged her to come with him, just so it looks like he owes her instead of the other way around. The two of them leave the shrine together, both unsure of what to say. Meanwhile, Shio is also walking home, feeling a little disappointed that she didn't get to go with Yonosuke. She was supposed to have a meeting, but she just found out it was canceled. Her mood lifts when she suddenly remembers that there's a big sale on snacks, and she hurries off toward the store to grab some. Just then, Yonosuke and Akari turn the corner from where Shio had just come from. The two of them are awkward around each other, which Yonosuke finds strange, considering that Akari is also his childhood friend. Looking at her more closely, Yonosuke realizes that Akari suddenly seems more mature than he remembers. The silence becomes too heavy, so Akari complains about how fast he's walking and how she's still getting soaked because he's holding the umbrella too high. Yonosuke adjusts it for her and can't help thinking that Akari probably hates him. Akari pushes his face away so he won't look at her, making Yonosuke wonder where the old Akari went. What he doesn't realize is that Akari is struggling to manage her emotions. Her cold attitude shows because she doesn't know how to act in this situation, even though she's secretly happy about how considerate he's being. She notices that Yonosuke's shoulder is getting soaked, so she pulls him closer and offers him the umbrella so he can dry it off. Yonosuke misunderstands her gesture and assumes she wants him to wipe her off instead. He asks what part she wants him to dry. Akari grows irritated and points out that she meant his shoulder. As she takes hold of the umbrella so he can dry himself, she accidentally grabs his hand. They both quickly pull away, but the awkwardness lingers. Yonosuke is confused by Akari's behavior, feeling like she keeps sending him mixed signals. He then notices she's holding the umbrella too high and points it out. Akari nervously admits that she's doing it for him since he's grown taller and she doesn't want to hit his head. Hearing that makes Yonosuke blush, since he rarely sees this gentle side of her anymore. Suddenly, a car speeds past and Yonosuke instinctively pushes Akari to shield her, causing the umbrella to fall from her hand. They're both unharmed, but Yonosuke realizes they're now completely soaked. He also notices he's holding her tightly and quickly lets go. Instead of snapping at him, Akari softly thanks him. Yonosuke feels there might still be a chance for them to mend their strained relationship, so he tells her that he's glad they got to walk home together, even with the rain pouring down. Suddenly, they both realize the state of Akari's clothes, and Akari assumes that this had been Yonosuke's goal all along. She slaps him hard, and Yonosuke convinces himself that he can never be part of a romantic comedy with her. Later that evening, Shio proudly looks over the haul spread out on her table. She thinks about sharing the snacks with Yonosuke, but notices that the lights in his room are still off. She then glances at the house next door and sees that Akari is home. Akari has her earphones on and carelessly complains about her feelings for Yonosuke to her stuffed animal. She doesn't realize that Shio is by her window and has heard everything. While staring at a picture of Yonosuke and venting, Akari suddenly feels a strange presence and finally notices Shio watching her through the window. She panics, realizing she isn't presentable. Akari complains that Shio should have knocked, while Shio tries to hide her own awkwardness by suggesting they have a snack party, holding up a large plastic bag filled with snacks. They eventually sit down and start eating. Shio feels uneasy, knowing Akari had been looking at a picture of Yonosuke earlier. Akari decides to bring it up herself and says that she doesn't have any feelings for Yonosuke. This puts Shio at ease for a moment, but as Akari keeps talking, Shio notices her expression soften. Carefully, Shio asks if Akari is really sure she doesn't have feelings for him. Akari immediately snaps that she hates Yonosuke, before calming down and saying she just wants to get along with him again as childhood friends. Shio admits that Yonosuke is stubborn, and that maybe the three of them would have been better friends if he had been kinder. Hearing this makes Akari think about how much she would actually like a gentler Yonosuke. Her face turns red, and to hide her embarrassment, she blurts out that the idea of Yonosuke being nice makes her sick. Shio is confused by how Akari keeps contradicting herself. Trying to change the subject, Akari shows Shio a cute video she found, but Shio accidentally sees part of her search history. Realizing where Shio is looking, Akari panics and accidentally smacks her with her phone. She quickly apologizes and rushes to grab an ice pack. When she opens one of her cabinets, several albums filled with pictures of Yonosuke tumble out. Akari tries to explain that Yonosuke just photobombs a lot, but the more she talks, the more obvious it becomes that Shio doesn't believe her. Even without Akari admitting it, Shio already knows the truth. She remembers how, when they were kids, they promised never to hide secrets from each other because they were best friends. Nervous but determined, Shio asks again what Akari truly feels about Yonosuke. Akari admits that Yonosuke is annoying because he treats both of them poorly. She says that even though they're his childhood friends, the least he could do is treat them like girls and be more considerate. Hearing this, Shio no longer feels threatened and agrees with her. She mentions how, just last year, Yonosuke gave her a toy dinosaur. The two of them start taking turns complaining about him before bursting into laughter. Deep down, they both know that even if they fall for the same person, they'll still remain best friends. While they're laughing, they don't realize that Yonosuke is standing outside Akari's room, able to hear everything because he had come to return the handkerchief. He turns to leave, but a sudden scream makes him rush inside. What he sees is so embarrassing that Akari immediately explodes, yelling at him for barging in and beating him up. Shio assesses the situation and wonders if Akari hates Yonosuke. One evening, Yonosuke finds himself on top of Shio, wondering how he ended up in this situation. One morning, Shio reads the latest volume of a romantic comedy comic in Yonosuke's room. She had snuck in again while he was still sleeping and decided to catch up on the series. As she reads, she tears up because the main heroine has finally ended up with her childhood friend. She wants a happy ending like that too. Shio glances over at Yonosuke and wonders if he feels the same way. Realizing her eyes are puffy from crying, she decides it's time to leave. Before climbing out the window, she gives Yonosuke one last smile and silently swears that she will have a romantic comedy with him. On his walk to school, Yonosuke recalls the previous day. He had managed to get his hands on the latest volume of a comic he'd been collecting. To avoid being recognized, he had gone out in disguise. Unfortunately, Shio and Akari spotted him immediately. He tried to hide the comic under his shirt as the girls crowded around him, eager to find out what he was hiding. The situation reminded him of a familiar romantic comedy setup, and while he was lost in his thoughts, the comic fell to the ground. Shio instantly recognized it as part of the series he kept hidden under his bed. Both Akari and Yonosuke were shocked that she knew, so Shio casually explained that she had seen them while lying around in his room. Akari wasted no time teasing him, pointing out that his taste in comics suggested he might be fantasizing about childhood friends. As Yonosuke continues walking to school, he dreads the day ahead, convinced they will keep mocking him. Suddenly, Shio covers his eyes from behind. He lightly scolds her for being too touchy in public. It didn't bother Shio at all, so she continues being affectionate as usual, but Yonosuke interprets it as teasing. Choosing to ignore her, he walks ahead. Before class, Shio tries approaching him again, but he excuses himself. At lunch, she makes another attempt, only for him to leave. Defeated, Shio returns to her desk. Troubled by how unusually cold Yonosuke was acting, Akari notices and offers to listen. Shio admits that Yonosuke has been distant lately. Nervous about the topic, Akari quickly brushes it off by calling Yonosuke a brat and mocking his love for romantic comedies. She encourages Shio to stay confident and keep pushing forward before walking away with a nervous laugh. After school, Shio ends up hiding in the gym storage room. She knows Yonosuke is supposed to be on cleanup duty there later, and she wants to reenact a scene from the romantic comedy comic. The scene involves the two leads getting trapped together in a storage room. Meanwhile, Akari decides to go with her friends, while Yonosuke is told to clean the classroom instead of the gym. Unaware of the change, Shio continues to wait for Yonosuke. She stays there for hours and she eventually falls asleep. When she wakes up, she realizes it's already late. She rushes to the door only to find that it won't budge. She considers calling someone for help, but her phone is already dead. She tries shouting for help, but after a while, she realizes it's pointless. Shio rests on some foam mats and wonders if she'll end up completely alone. She's always been alone, and now that Yonosuke's acting cold toward her, she finds herself feeling the same sadness from before. Suddenly, she hears strange sounds coming from the door. It opens and Yonosuke appears, panting as if he ran all the way there. When he sees Shio, he tells her he knew she was there. He assumes she'd planned to surprise him during cleanup duty. He then turns away and says they should head home, since everyone is worried about her. Shio looks at him and tells him she's thankful he found her. Nervously, Yonosuke replies that it's because they're childhood friends. His words trigger a memory for Shio, another time when Yonosuke saved her from her loneliness. He had brought her meatballs and even sat down to eat with her. He had told her to call him whenever she felt lonely because they were childhood friends. Blushing, Yonosuke decides to let everyone know that he's found her. Shio brightens at his concern and finally admits that she was afraid he hated her because of how cold he had been acting lately. Yonosuke pales, not wanting to admit that he acted coldly because he was embarrassed that Shio found out about his comic collection. Overcome with excitement, Shio moves to hug him. Yonosuke isn't prepared to catch her and they end up toppling to the ground. Yonosuke quickly tries to get off her, but Shio suddenly asks if it's okay for them to stay alone together. Meanwhile, Akari's nervousness continues to grow as Yonosuke still hasn't responded to her messages. Yonosuke manages to pull himself together. Instead of kissing her, he presses her lips together with his hand and scolds her for playing around when everyone is worried about her. He gets off her and reaches for his phone as he convinces himself that this was just Shio trying to tease him again. Shio feels a bit disappointed that nothing has changed between them, but she forces a smile and casually says that she's hungry. She wonders out loud if she'll be having hamburger steak for dinner. Her words make Yonosuke remember the time they shared meatballs when they were kids. Shio notices that he suddenly grows quiet. Yonosuke props himself up and sits on the stage, then asks her if something has been bothering her. Shio pouts, realizing that Yonosuke seems to read her too easily. She climbs onto the stage as well and sits beside him. She tells him that she doesn't really want to talk about anything, but just wants to spend more time with him. They sit in silence for a while and Yonosuke starts to feel nervous. Trying to break the ice, he jokes that Shio has suddenly gotten shy, explaining that Shio is usually very touchy. Shio's expression softens into something sad as she quietly reminds him that he was the one who told her to stop. Feeling guilty, Yonosuke tells Shio that she's free to do those things when it's just the two of them. She immediately takes the opportunity, holding his hand and leaning against him. She notices right away that he smells nice, which gives away the fact that Yonosuke already showered before he ran out to look for her. Yonosuke feels his nerves creep up again as Shio squeezes his hand and admits that she wants to spend more time with him. She leans in to hug him and shares how strong her feelings for him are. Just as Yonosuke starts to think that it might actually be possible to begin a romantic comedy with Shio, the gym lights suddenly turn on. Akari stands by the door, panting heavily. Yonosuke and Shio immediately pull apart as Akari approaches. She fixes Shio with a stern glare, but it quickly breaks as she starts crying and hugs Shio out of sheer worry. Akari turns her concern into anger toward Yonosuke for not texting her that he found Shio. Yonosuke argues that he did, which makes Akari check her phone. She sees his message, sent over 20 minutes ago, and grows frustrated again because he didn't bring Shio home right away. Shio tries to explain, telling Akari that she got trapped in the storage room and just needed a moment to calm down after getting out. Yonosuke's eyes widen when he realizes that Shio doesn't mention their moment together. Shio excuses herself to use the restroom. As she leaves, Yonosuke convinces himself that Shio was simply lonely and that there's nothing going on between them. Akari, however, remains suspicious and asks if Yonosuke has feelings for Shio. Yonosuke admits that he likes Shio, but quickly adds that he sees her as family. That answer doesn't satisfy Akari, and she demands the truth. Yonosuke insists that he's being honest and that they're just childhood friends. Not long after, Shio returns and the three of them head home. Later that evening, Yonosuke has trouble sleeping as he keeps thinking about Shio, especially since the way she spoke sounded almost like a confession. Morning finally arrives and Yonosuke peeks out of his door. When he sees Shio leaving her house, he feels that all his efforts to bury his feelings were useless. He hides his nervousness by casually chatting about her changed uniform, and they begin walking to school together. During the walk, Yonosuke can't help but notice that Shio looks unusually cute. Suddenly, Shio shyly tells him that she needs to do something and runs ahead. Yonosuke is confused, but he still finds her expression adorable. He wonders if this means they'll start dating soon. Since holding hands is already normal for them, his thoughts drift further into more intimate moments he can share with her. Overcome with excitement, he starts running in place, his expression completely changing. Akari suddenly calls him gross. He freezes as Akari accuses him of seeing Shio like a comic book character. Yonosuke tries to explain himself, but Akari refuses to listen. She nearly hits him with her bag as she storms ahead. Yonosuke is left stunned by her reaction before realizing that she might actually be hiding her feelings for him by acting cold. The thought makes his eyes light up. Now he believes he's living his dream of being in a romantic comedy with both of his childhood friends. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Shio worries that Yonosuke might already know how she feels. She frets over what his feelings toward her might be, realizing that their dynamic will change. Akari spots her, and based on Shio's blush, she has a feeling something happened and tries to confirm whether anything occurred between Shio and Yonosuke last night. Nearby, Yonosuke is in the men's restroom and overhears their conversation. It sounds to him like they're about to argue, so he rushes over to stop them. Just as he reaches the entrance, he hears Shio that she isn't going to date Yonosuke. She shows Akari a page from the comic on her phone and explains that she was just reenacting a scene to make fun of him. Yonosuke suddenly laughs from the entrance. He tells them that he knew it all along. He turns away and Shio tries to make amends. Unable to hold back anymore, he runs off, tears falling as his heart breaks. Shio is filled with regret for ruining her chance with him. Akari, meanwhile, feels secretly relieved, then immediately scolds herself for feeling that way. Yonosuke spends the entire first period on the rooftop. Later, during her bath, Akari finds herself thinking about Yonosuke. She tries to shake the feeling off and steps out of the tub, wondering if he has forgotten their promise. Suddenly, Yonosuke enters the bathroom and she immediately kicks him out. Downstairs, everyone gathers and Akari learns that Yonosuke's and Shio's houses both have broken bathrooms, so their families decided to come over to share the bathroom and have a small party. As the families mingle, Akari slips away and hides on the balcony. Yonosuke follows her to apologize, but she refuses to listen and even tells him to leave. The rejection frustrates him, especially since Akari used to beg him to stay when they were younger. Suddenly, Akari grabs his shirt and asks if he remembers their promise. He says that he does and leans closer. Akari expects a kiss, but instead he whispers that he promised never to leave her alone when she went to the bathroom. He fondly recalls how, during sleepovers, she used to wait both him and Shio to accompany her. He chuckles at the memory, which only annoys Akari. She had hoped he remembered a different promise, the one he made when her cat died, when he promised never to leave her side. Suddenly, Yonosuke softly repeats that same promise, then asks why she's bringing it up now. He freezes when Akari suddenly asks when he's going to make her his wife. Before he can respond, Shio wraps her arms around his waist, slightly drunk. Her mother explains that Shio somehow got tipsy from the atmosphere alone. When Shio falls back, she teasingly comments on how red Yonosuke's face is. Akari responds by slapping his back and walking ahead, smiling to herself as she teases him, satisfied that she still has an effect on him. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss a new episode every week.